Hey there, welcome back to another review, this time of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is the 30th anniversary Ultimate Edition box set. It's got a, this is the case that has three different versions of the movie. I watched the theatrical version because it's honestly the version I prefer the most. And also, I like to watch, when I review movies for my channel, I like to watch the theatrical version, not the director's cut, when I can. There's rare instances, like whenever I get around to doing a review of Blade Runner, I will probably go with the director's cut because I'm not a fan of the theatrical cut. But I'm not, when it comes to Close Encounters, I saw the special edition a long time ago, was not a fan. I don't like the way it ends. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And the director's cut, I don't think I've seen, but it has a few things. But I thought, let's just stick with what works. And it also comes with this poster. So it actually has the poster of the movie, but also has the poster itself. On the back of it has like this thing that talks about the differences between each cut of the film. So you have a poster for the movie, and then this thing, which a view from above, which talks about all these different cuts of the film. It's pretty cool. I don't think the Blu-ray set has all of this stuff. And honestly, I thought the picture quality of this looked pretty damn good on my Blu-ray player for a DVD. And then there's this little booklet, which is kind of cool, for the Close Encounters. If you're a fan of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, there's some really cool pictures and stuff, but there's not a lot in terms of feature, behind the scenes stuff. Some black and white photos, some color photos. I would recommend, there's a book, there actually is a making of book on Close Encounters that I do have, and I don't think I have it like in plain view right now. If I had it in plain view, I'd go grab it, but I don't. It might be down here. It's not down here when I look at the first layer or something. Yeah, no, it's not there. It's probably somewhere. I might talk about it later, like when I do a video showcasing my movie books, because I have a lot of them. So yeah, there's not. It's an okay booklet. I mean, there's a little picture there talking about showing the mothership and some of the stuff, and yeah, it's all right. It's not really that much though. Kind of disappointing if you think about it. I mean, you spend, probably cost a decent amount of money to make this, and then, this booklet is just pretty bland, and there's not much to it. But definitely can't say the same about the film. Wow, this movie left me speechless after I watched it again. I haven't seen this film in years. I remember liking it anyway, but after watching this film the most recent time, I loved it. I adored it. I thought this was an amazing movie, and get ready for like maybe close to an hour. I'm going to try to do this as quick as possible, but get ready for a bunch of praise. A whole heaping of praise for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, if I could say the dang title for the movie. Try saying that 5 times fast. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So it's a mouthful. It really is. Close Encounters that's all, folks. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is a 1977 film, and it's directed by Steven Spielberg. This is the fourth film that he directed, and in essence, the second big film that he directed. The first one was Jaws, and this was his follow-up to Jaws. There was a lot riding on this, and Hollywood is pretty fickle. So if you don't succeed uh, with your second film after your first big movie, I mean, Hollywood can be kind of, you know, they can be, like I said, they can be fickle. You can have one big movie, but if you don't have another big movie, if you don't direct another hit that's hit financially and critically, then you got a bullseye on your head, and you're walking on thin ice. So Spielberg put a lot on the line here, doing Close Encounters of the Third Kind as his follow-up to Jaws instead of another blockbuster. A UFO film was a pretty big risk back then. And yes, there was Star Wars that came out the same year, but Star Wars was viewed as a risk as well. I mean, this movie was shot in 1976 and released in 77. So, much like Star Wars, doing a sci-fi movie with a budget of $20 million, which is unheard of back in 1977 or 1976 when they probably started shooting, was a huge risk. And to make it an even bigger risk, to make the stakes even higher, Columbia Pictures was banking on this film in order to save their company. Because the studio was in dire straits financially, and they reached out to Spielberg and were like, Steven, please, we know there's this project that you've been wanting to do. He had it under a different title at this time, because this is a project that he actually had wanted to do before 1976. He just didn't, or 77, but he just didn't think the effects were there yet. He didn't think the technology was there yet in order to do the film effectively. So he thought maybe he'd do it as a documentary about UFOs. And then it turned into more of its own movie. And there's different versions of the script. It was under different names. One of the names was Watch the Skies, which is a reference probably to Howard Hawks' The Thing. Because I think that's the end of the movie. It's like, Watch the Skies. And so yeah, there's a lot of different stuff. And then he changed the title again to Kingdom Come. And eventually then it was changed from that to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, based on a term that was created by a UFO investigator, Close Encounters. Yeah, you don't really think about that, but the title is derived from UFOologist J. Allen Hynek's classification of close encounters with aliens, in which the third kind denotes human observations of aliens or animate beings. And so, yeah, you don't really think about that, but back then, close encounters was a fairly new term. And this UFO thing was a fairly new thing as well. People investigated it. This is also one of the first films that took UFOs seriously. This film took the theory, the idea of UFOs, with a lot of seriousness. This was not a over-the-top, silly, alien invasion movie, which is what a lot of the other alien movies had been before this. And so that's a pretty big risk too. This wasn't about blood-sucking aliens from outer space, crash land on Earth and, suck our brains. That's not really what this is about. So, and there really wasn't a film like this that I can think of that had been out before it. So this is, even the concept itself was a huge risk. And thankfully, the risk paid off because the movie was a huge hit. It made $303.8 million worldwide, which is a huge box office return for a film that cost $20 million, and it saved Columbia Pictures. It saved them from bankruptcy. It's based on a screenplay by Steven Spielberg, but he didn't really write all of it. He had an early draft that he did, and then he got help from Paul Schrader, John Hill. Paul Schrader and John Hill wrote a rewrite that had some elements that really weren't working for Steven. Like the lead was a police officer instead of an everyman, and there's a few other things that just didn't jive well enough for him. So David Giler came on board and did a little bit of a rewrite. But, it's still, Spielberg didn't think his rewrite was quite there yet either. So he ended up getting his friends, Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins, as well as Jerry Belson, who contributed to the screenplay in varying degrees. So Spielberg, he's listed as the only credit, but he had a lot of help writing the screenplay. And at first I was like, man, this is one of the most impressive scripts I've ever seen from Spielberg. And Why does he write like this anymore? And then I'm like, well, yeah, well, it's because he wasn't the only one who wrote this screenplay. So if I had to take any fault in this film, which to be honest, I really don't find really that many faults at all with this movie. I would probably say some of the faults would have to be Spielberg taking all the credit for writing this movie, which is it's a film that was a joint effort. It wasn't just Spielberg doing everything. But of course he did direct the movie, and his direction in this, in my opinion, is some of his finest. And I think he was robbed of an Oscar for best directing for this. I know Woody Allen won the Oscar for Annie Hall, but come on, Annie Hall, as good as it is, I don't really know because I haven't seen it. It's not really my type of film. You can't really say that was a hard film to direct. This was a very difficult film to direct and to get right, because it had all these different effects shots that had never been done before, and all these other different elements and all these different things that could have easily not worked out too well, could have easily appeared to be somewhat cheap, or could have easily not been as effective. But Spielberg handled it with a very deft hand and did a really excellent job directing the movie. It's some of his most impressive work, in my opinion. And I just you can see that he has a little bit of more of a grit or some sort of realism to his directing here. He takes more chances, and I like early Spielberg a little bit more than Spielberg post ET, because he kind of he takes more chances, he takes more risks. The film feels more grounded. It isn't it isn't a fantasy. It isn't for kids. It isn't schmaltzy. It isn't too sugary sweet. I mean, there's some sweet moments in this movie, some really poignant scenes, but they don't feel like they're so sugary sweet that it makes you feel like you've just eaten an entire bag of candy, like films like E.T. or some of his later films, like Always, for instance, um, make you feel when you see them. That's the kind of experience that you get when you watch those films. It also features a score by John Williams, which is also one of his best scores. If he didn't do the score for Star Wars, that came out the same year, this probably would have won the Oscar for best score as well. But at least it did get nominated. This is a very impressive score. This is a very challenging score. John, he really is a master at taking like a few notes and making them really really memorable and really powerful. I mean, look at Jaws. The main theme for Jaws is just dun 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 dun. It's a very easy theme to play. Pretty much anyone can play it. Even people who don't even know how to play the piano can do Jaws. But he manages to figure that out, and he makes it look easier than it really is to come up with these very simple note progressions, but they somehow some way end up being really memorable and also really 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 powerful. So yeah, they stick with you, they resonate with you. And there's a reason why. I mean, because Williams is just a genius when it comes to that kind of stuff. I mean, he went through multiple different ideas and concepts and theories on what he would use for the now famous, chord progressions, and then eventually he settled on the very memorable dun 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 dun. So he settled on that, and it was great. It was a great choice. I love that. And the other bits of the score are also really good as well. Think about it. He had to come up with an entire language that's made completely out of musical notes, specifically for this movie. I mean, that had to have been very difficult. And John Williams did a really amazing job doing that. And cinematography by Vilmos Zsigmond was I don't know if I said his name correctly. It was also very impressive, visually impressive, stunning. He won the Oscar. He deserved it, especially the way that he shot the scenes with the mothership and all this, and the UFOs and the scenes at Devil's Tower. Gorgeous, really, absolutely beautiful. This is a beautiful film. Edited by Michael Kahn. One of the first films he edited was Spielberg. He would go on to edit a bunch of films for Spielberg. Really tight editing. Michael Kahn is a very talented editor, and this is one of his first few films he edited. He did a great job editing this as well. And of course, you have the cast. I mean, you have Richard Dreyfuss, who plays Roy Neary, who is this kind of everyman who gets, you know, sucked into this UFO craze, these UFO sightings, and this creates this obsession within him to just find this location that just keeps popping up in his head, and of course it ends up being Devil's Tower. And originally Steve McQueen was Spielberg's first choice to play Roy, and McQueen was very impressed with the script, but he felt he was not right for the role because he wasn't able to cry on cue. So Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, and Gene Hackman were considered, but they also turned down the part. And Jack Nicholson, I don't know who Jack Nicholson is. Jack Nicholson turned it down because of scheduling conflicts. So Spielberg explained when he was filming Jaws, Dreyfuss talked me into casting him, and he listened to about 155 days worth of Close Encounters. He even contributed ideas. And so Dreyfuss was able to convince Steven to cast him as Roy, and he knocked it into outer space. This is one of the best performances of his career. This might be my pick for his best performance. And I know he won an Oscar for his performance for The Goodbye Girl that came out the same year, but I mean, this performance to me is just a tad more impressive considering how easy it would have been to mess it up. He could have hammed it up, but he didn't. In my opinion, anyway, it was a very this role needed a very delicate balance in order to be successful, and Richard Dreyfuss really managed to walk that tightrope like a pro. Francois Truffaut, he is actually well-known somewhat. I think he was a director or a writer at the time. He was casted as Claude Lacombe, who's this French government scientist in charge of the UFO-related activities in the U.S. You have Melinda Dillon, who, which I remember her the most as playing the mother in Christmas Story, but she's almost completely unrecognizable in this, and she definitely does deliver quite possibly her best performance of her career as well. And it was so impressive. She was nominated for an Oscar, but she did lose that one though. But hey, at least she got nominated. She plays Julian Guyler, Barry's mother. She forms a similar obsession to Roy's as well, you know, of this image of this location that keeps popping up in their heads of Devil's Tower. Teri Garr is also in this as Veronica Ronnie Neary, who is Roy's wife. She did a good job of what she had to work with. She's not in the film that much, but she's effective. Amy Irving also auditioned for the role, but it went to Teri Garr. Cary Guffey, he plays Barry Guyler, who is Jillian's young kid, her son, who ends up getting abducted in the middle of the film in a very tense, terrifying sequence. Spielberg actually conducted a series of method acting techniques to help Guffey, who was cast when he was just 3 years old. Bob Balaban, who would go on to be in films such as Altered States. He plays David Laughlin, who's the assistant to Lacombe, and he's also his English to French interpreter. Josef Sommer plays Larry Butler, who's a man who meets Roy and Jillian in Wyoming, attempts to scale the Devil's Tower with them, which is kind of interesting because Josef Sommer was in Daryl, so and I reviewed that fairly recently. So, that's kind of cool. He was also in Independence Day, but not the Independence Day you're thinking of. The other Independence Day, the 1983 drama Independence Day. And he also had very early roles by Lance Henriksen. Yes, the Lance Henriksen. I think he has like one line of dialogue. He doesn't really say that much, but it's clearly Lance Henriksen. And he plays one of the assistants for Lacombe. Roberts Blossom, who you might recognize from films such as Christine and Home Alone. He played Old Man Marley. He plays who plays a character named Farmer, who's a radical sort of comic relief kind of guy who claims that he has seen Bigfoot. And you also have J. Allen Hynek and Stanton T. Friedman, who are these big UFO analysts and investigators. They make cameo appearances in the closing scenes, the closing sequence. And Spielberg's friends, Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins, who also helped write the screenplay, they cameo as World War II pilots returning from the mothership. And then you also have Jerry Garcia, of all people, who makes an appearance in a crowd scene, and Carl Weathers. Yes, Apollo Creed himself appears as a soldier in the movie, sort of a bouncer for the military to prevent people from going into Devil's Tower. Interestingly enough, his role is only in the theatrical cut of the film. It's not available in any of the other cuts of the movie. So it's a great cast. They all do their jobs really well. But Richard Dreyfuss is without a doubt is the standout here. You sympathize with him. It's a tragic tale. It's a guy who's just doing his job. He has this incredible experience, incredible encounter that is really well done practically. With all the things that start floating around. He's sitting in his truck and the mailboxes next to him the flags start flipping up on their own, and stuff starts shaking, and things start floating in his truck. It's a very tense, scary sequence. And then, the film does a great job putting you in the shoes of these individuals, of these characters who are experiencing and seeing these extraordinary things. And I love the way the shot is set up, where the truck is all shaking and everything, and then there's like this UFO just shows up behind him, like it's just driving, right behind him, like it's somebody who's just driving around at night, and they're just pulling up behind him in their car. But no, then you just see what looks like headlights, and they start floating into the air, and then you realize that's not a car, that's something else. And then of course a few scenes later you actually see the UFOs, and there's these smaller UFOs who are just beautiful to look at with all their glowing lights, and it's just a wonder to behold. And this is 20 minutes into the movie, and I honestly think the story is rather simple. It's straightforward. It's about a journey. It's about it's about getting to Devil's Tower and seeing the finale, which is an epic finale. It is such an enthralling, spectacular finale. I don't think it's a letdown. And there's some people who've said it's a letdown, but I absolutely disagree with that. I mean, what were you expecting? Were you expecting explosions or something? I mean, you have the small UFOs show up at the landing strip near Devil's Tower, and then there's a whole gamut of them. Like, it seems like hundreds of them, or at least over a dozen, that start coming out of the woodworks, falling out of the sky, and it's just such a thrilling experience. It's like the film does such a great job shooting these sequences with these UFOs that it feels like you were there. You were there with Roy and Jillian, and just watching this amazing, just unbelievable event occur before your own eyes. It's like you're experiencing it for yourself. It's that well done. The effects by Douglas Trumbull and company. I don't know if they deserve. I mean, Star Wars has some really amazing visual effects, but I mean, Close Encounters is pretty close too. But once again, I think Close Encounters would have won more Academy Awards if it wasn't for Star Wars. But at least it was nominated for Best Visual Effects, and rightfully so. These are some really just spectacular, stellar visual effects that I think still hold up really well to this day, at least to me anyway. I can only imagine seeing these effects for the first time in 1977. I mean, people's jaws must have dropped to the floor. So, going back to the story is sort of straightforward. It's it's about a journey, these of Roy, and it deals with his obsession and how it affects him and those around him, and it's an obsession he has no control over. And that's what's so tragic, and that's why you sympathize with him so much. It's not like he's going through a mental breakdown, even though that's what his wife believes he is going through. This is something he has no control over. And, you can't help but feel for somebody like that. I mean, and he ends up, technically, this obsession ruins everything. It ruins his life. It ruins his family. It ends up making him lose his job, and it loses his family. He probably thinks it's making him lose his sanity. So, and he's not alone on that either, because Melinda Dillon's character is going through the same thing. And like I was saying, it's sort of straightforward, but it has enough layers to it that it's always interesting. It's always enthralling. It's always encapsulating. It always keeps me glued to the screen and interested in what's going on, and interested in the story and what happens to the characters and how it ends. And yeah, this is a film. I saw this most recent time I watched this, folks. And excuse me real quick, I'm just going to get a drink. I watched this at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And if this was boring, if it was at all slow-paced, if it didn't have characters I was interested in, if its story wasn't engaging, I would have found that out really quickly, because it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I could have easily fallen asleep. And that's not what happened. I was just glued to the screen. I was just laying there in my bed, just completely engrossed in the film and the story it was telling. So, yeah, I give this story a lot of praise. And it sucked me in right from the beginning, too, because it started out with, the discovery of the lost Flight 19. Not really the pilots, they show up later, but the planes. These vintage World War II planes, supposedly this whole squadron of planes that went missing back in the 40s, has now, for some reason, and somehow, has appeared in the middle of the Mexican desert, somewhere in Mexico. And that just grabbed me right from the get-go, because I love that kind of stuff. And it's based on a real case. That's a real, like, unsolved mystery sort of thing. This is like something straight out of Unsolved Mysteries. The mystery is solved. Here's Flight 19. It's just showing up out of nowhere. And I love how this film takes such a realistic approach to such fantastical events. That's what makes it so captivating to me, is because it takes that approach to what's going on. It's very realistic in how it approaches these things, like how the government would react to it. The government would totally try to cover this up. They go as far to make stuff up, to lie to people, to lie to the American public in order to get them out of Devil's Tower, so they can set up their own top secret landing strip, because they don't want the American public to know about this. They don't want them to panic, because they don't want them to feel like they're not alone in the universe, because, that's honestly kind of scary. It's kind of cool at the same time. It's kind of scary, though, too, to finally have that realization that you are not alone. And, but you totally see the government doing the secret sort of stuff. I like the nice touch where they show the government officials, they had all these trucks and stuff that are using to ship all of these materials to Devil's Tower, and they ended up disguising them as like everyday, normal trucks and normal vehicles, like delivery trucks for Baskin and Robbins or Coca-Cola. And I really love that touch, because or Piggly Wiggly, and I can totally see the U.S. government doing that, and I'm pretty sure they have done that. Snuck stuff in right under our own noses with, top secret stuff that's, put on trucks and delivered to these super secret locations in very innocuous looking vehicles. So yeah, very gritty, realistic. Not necessarily gritty. It's not necessarily the best way to put it, but there is a little bit of an edge to it. I mean, it starts out. I mean, the aliens at first, you have the first sighting. It's like it's almost like a theme park attraction. These UFOs, these beautiful looking UFOs show up and fly around and then fly away, and they're kind of a nuisance because they shut the power off. Yeah, but they cause the power to go out in the city. But it seems rather harmless. But then you have the stuff where the scene where the clouds start getting darker and these more spaceships fly through, and then you have the abduction scene where the kid is abducted, where Barry is abducted by these aliens. And it's a very scary sequence, to be honest. And a lot of it's done practically with all this stuff like freaking out and things in the house like moving on their own accord, like something straight out of Poltergeist. And then by the end of the movie, when these aliens are finally revealed, I mean, even the first time you see the alien, it's like this spindly spider-looking thing, and it's in this stance which looks like it might pounce, and then it ends up, getting out of the stance and opens its arms wide like it's, ready to give you a hug. I mean, it keeps it somewhat ambiguous until it gets to the end, and then it's something sweet, something very poignant, and very powerful. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna go like, oh, here's this story, this is what happens, blah 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 blah, point by point by point. No, I want you to see it for yourself if you haven't already, and just wanted to talk about the moments that I did really enjoy, that really stood out to me. And other moments that stood out to me, other than just the amazing, just cornucopia of colors and visual effects, in the climax, I would have to say the more subtle moments. The mashed potato scene, which is very memorable, but at the same time, it's somewhat subtle in comparison to these other sequences in the movie, but very, very effective because it shows how the effect of this obsession that Roy has is having on his family. He gets the mashed potatoes and he just starts playing with it, and there's no music here. The direction is really good. Spielberg just lets the emotion speak for him, and the performance speak for the scene. And the kid, his oldest son, is crying at the table, and it's just a very uncomfortable scene to watch. But it really does encapsulate what it's like to have somebody that you love go through some kind of mental breakdown, and I could see why his family would think that he's going through a mental breakdown here. And then, of course, then Richard Dreyfuss is Roy saying, "No, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. Daddy's okay." And then they're like, "No, no, not, no, you're not. You're not okay." And I like the arc that Roy has, where he's not perfect, and he tries to make things work out for his family. He's got a big family, and he ends up losing his job, and then he's got to deal with this sunburn that makes him look like a 50-50 bar. And then he saw these UFOs, and he wants to share his just unbelievable, just grandiose experience with his family, but his wife wants none of it. She doesn't believe him. She doesn't even remotely even think that what he's saying could be true. And so that's got to hurt him as well. And then he has this image that keeps popping up in his head, and he keeps just drawing things and making these mountains and stuff out of clay and mashed potatoes. And then there's a moment when he thinks that, all right, I'm better. I can get over this. And he starts taking all the UFO articles out of his room, and he's getting ready to break the clay sculpture that he was working on. And then he rips the top off of it. And then he has this moment of realization where he's this aha moment where he's like, oh my, that's it. That's what I've been, that's what's been in my head. That's what I've been trying to create for so long. And then, then he spirals further into this obsession, and it goes from just mashed potatoes on a plate to digging up all the plants in the backyard and breaking a window and throwing the plants into the house and throwing bricks into the house and dumping dirt in there and stealing the neighbor's chicken wire. And he just completely loses it. And I could totally see why his wife was like, I'm getting my kids, I'm taking the kids, and I'm getting out of here, because this is not normal behavior. And this obsession gets so crazy that he builds a giant sculpture of Devil's Tower in the living room. I mean, that's I love that element of the film. I really like that, because that just ends that perfectly showcases the human element of this story. I mean, it's a story that has aliens and UFOs and contact with aliens and and people from another world, all this otherworldly stuff in the plot and in the story, but it's a deeply human story, and I think that's why it resonates with so many people, not just me, but so many other people as well. I mean, this film is very highly regarded as one of Spielberg's best, and I can definitely see why. And it's got a lot of critical acclaim. I could definitely see why, and I agree pretty much with all of it. And so, yeah, it is a very human story, even though it has a lot of alien elements to it. So, also, I got to talk about the ending, which not only is it just the visual effects are impressive. I mean, those are just amazing, but I love the whole scenes where the U.S. government is communicating with the UFOs, with the tones. And I love how it starts out somewhat simple and then it gets really complicated. And I really like the idea of the aliens returning these people that they abducted. And these people they haven't aged. So they're returning to Earth many, many years later. And they're returning to a world that they don't know. And people that they know and love are probably going to be older, way older, or might not even be alive anymore. And it's that kind of suspended animation thing that I always like. I always think that leaves a lot of room for some really great drama. And so I like that aspect of it as well. And of course, the whole thing, the ending where Roy is chosen. He was invited. He was invited by these aliens. That's why they put these images of the Devil's Tower in his head. He was invited by these aliens to come to Devil's Tower so he can witness this unbelievable light show, but also to have the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to travel with these aliens across the stars and have such an just timeless, priceless experience. To really go where no man has gone before. And he goes for it. And they picked him. The military had handpicked these other people who dress up in these garish looking red jumpsuits, which looks like something straight out of V. And this predated V by many years, but it just reminds me a lot of V. And the aliens are like, nah, we're not picking you. Those other guys, they're a bunch of they're a bunch of hard asses, or we don't want to do. They're boring. Why would we want to pick them to go on a trip with? So they pick Roy. And I know a lot of people nowadays have a problem with this ending, even Spielberg himself. I don't. I love it. I love this ending because it stands out, because it isn't that typical, oh, yeah, I can't do this. I'm going to pass this chance up because I need to go back with my family. I need to go back to Earth. And I'm just like, I'm glad it didn't do that. This is definitely a Spielberg that I miss. These are the type of risks that I'm talking about that Spielberg took with this film that he doesn't really take nowadays. You go with the unexpected ending over the expected one. It's so much more powerful to end this movie the way that it does, with Roy being welcomed in open arms onto the spacecraft, and then he gets to fly away into outer space and learn things that no man has ever learned before. And also, if you think about it, there's no guarantee. The film doesn't outright say he's not coming back. So you can make the interpretation that maybe it's a short trip, like it was for the kid, for Barry, and then he'll come back and he'll share all this wonderful knowledge with the people of Earth, patch things up with his family, and grow old and become a grandfather, and things are hunky dory. You have that happy ending you want so much. So, I mean, really, it doesn't say outright he's not coming back, so he could come back. But then again, he could also come back later like these other people did, and then that's a whole different thing. And I actually would love to see a movie like that. You couldn't do a sequel to this film now, because the best time to have done it, if you're going to continue where this film left off and have Roy come back to Earth, and he might have been gone for a few hours, but he comes back, and it's like 20 or 30 years later, and he hasn't aged a day. You can't really do that right now because Richard Dreyfuss is way too old. So what I would do is just make an original film based on this type of concept. Call it Missing Time. I mentioned this before in my Flight of the Navigator review, but I would love to see this movie. A sci-fi drama about a man who is abducted by aliens, maybe willingly or unwillingly, and he returns to Earth. The aliens return him to Earth, and he thinks he's been gone for only a few hours, and then really he's been gone maybe he's gone for a day, but he's been gone for a day means like 20 or 30 years. And I think that'd be a great drama, great sci-fi drama, to see what happens, the aftermath, and follow this man. Follow his life, follow what's going on with his family or his friends, and how they interact with him, how they react to him. He hasn't aged a day, and they're 20 to 30 years older now. All of his time that he's missed, all these things that he has to catch up on, and maybe have the government prodding him, trying to get him to tell them, what do these aliens to communicate to you, and all this sort of stuff. And it could be a very powerful movie if it's done right. So, I also really like the aliens themselves. I mean, the Carlo Rambaldi effects, when you just see them like from a distance, you can tell that they're just kids in suits. But, when you have the other scenes where the alien is doing the hand signs and the tall alien, I think it looks pretty good. I like the design by Carlo Rambaldi. I think there's a little bit of stop motion with these aliens, and I thought it was especially when they're blinking. And I thought that was an intriguing touch, because most of the time when you see these type of grays or this type of alien that you see a lot in these movies, their eyes don't blink. So these eyes blinked a little bit more, and they looked a little bit more human than some of those other alien designs did. Kind of like a newborn baby in some ways. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this movie. But I honestly, I really don't know what else to say. I mean, there are the different versions of the movie. I want to talk about the special edition real quick. I mean, $1.5 million was given to Steven Spielberg by Columbia Pictures to add some scenes, to show what was inside the mothership for a re-release in 1980 called, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the special edition. And it was a huge hit. It wasn't as big of a hit as when the film came out, but it was still a pretty big hit. I mean, this was re-released, and the re-release made a further $15.7 million in the box office. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive for a re-release of a movie that had already come out in the theater. So, this special edition, it shows what's inside the mothership, and to be honest, I don't really care for it. And Steven Spielberg himself doesn't care for it either, and I can understand why. He was forced, his hand was forced to do this, and it shows. It's a letdown. It's disappointing. What you can imagine with your imagination is so much more effective and so much more inventive and ingenious than what's on screen here. And in the director's cut, I guess I heard Spielberg did cut that out for the director's cut. The special edition also has a few more character development sequences, but I know a lot of people prefer the special edition or the director's cut over the theatrical cut. But I don't. I like the theatrical cut. I think it's paced a little bit better. I think there were plenty of character development moments. I didn't think there needed to be a ton more. And I didn't really think, of course, I didn't really think there needed to be scenes later, that show you the inside of the mothership either. So, I definitely do prefer the theatrical version, and I might be kind of alone on that because a lot of people seem to just think the director's cut is just so much better, and or the special edition, because even Roger Ebert himself, who really liked the theatrical cut, said, that the special edition is so much better. Why didn't Spielberg do this the first time around? And I'm like, I don't know. I like the theatrical cut more, and I guess let's sort of end my thoughts on the film with some actual personal things, from some family moments that are associated with this film. Excuse me again, going back to another drink. So, in particular, my grandmother, she saw this film in the theater. And she has this really, fun story. It's kind of tragic when you think about it. I mean, not super, super sad, but it's definitely a bummer. So what happens, she sees it in the theater, and just about when the mothership is about to rise over, the plateau, it's coming down out of the sky, and it's going to show itself. It's going to reveal itself over the tower, over Devil's Tower. The film broke. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine sitting in the theater watching this movie, seeing these amazing visual effects, and you were waiting for this. This is what this film was building up to, is the arrival of the mothership, and then the damn film breaks. So I love that story. I wanted to share that with you guys, and then also, I have actually been to Devil's Tower. So I think that's really cool too. I actually have been to Devil's Tower in Wyoming. I went there with my stepdad and my mom, and we hiked around the tower and everything, and saw it up close, and so that's really cool too. So so it's not there. That's what's really cool about this movie is it's a movie that I really, really enjoy, but it's also a movie that I can tell stories about. I can tell stories about, if I show this movie to, my kids, if I do have any in the future, I can be like, hey, you see that tower, Devil's Tower? I've been there. It was really cool, and tell them a story, that my grandmother had, where the film broke, some fun stuff. And anyway, yeah, the movie was really entertaining, I thought, even though it had some nice moments of levity that kind of broke up the monotony, and that I did appreciate. And I thought the film was really well paced for a movie that's like 2 hours and 15 minutes. I was never bored by this movie. I know there are people who are bored by it. To each their own. I didn't find this boring at all. And it was just a really wonderful film. It was a tour de force of filmmaking, of storytelling, of visual effects, of editing, of cinematography, of performances. And I really did feel that Close Encounters of the Third Kind was truly out of this world. And I don't know what else to say about the movie. Except if I was going to rate out of 5 stars, I give it 5 out of 5. 2 thumbs up. I give it a round of applause. I mean, if I could stand up and cheer for this movie, I would. I loved it that much. So anyway, yeah, Spielberg, you know, you may be a schmuck, but this is pre-schmuck. This is pre-schmuck Steven Spielberg. This is pre-prick Steven Spielberg. So, you know, I give him a huge hand for this one. And it does it does show how talented he was and still is in many ways. You know, I really do admire the man, his work. I admire his work. I admire his directing. I don't necessarily admire the man. He's done some questionable shit. He's told, you know, Poltergeist fans to fuck off more times than once. He, you know, was the reason Night Skies was never made. And speaking of that, that's the next video, so stay tuned for that. And but yeah, Stevie, you did a great job with this, and he had a lot had a lot riding on this, and he pulled it off. And this film is a big reason why the sci-fi genre in the late 70s had such a big boom. It had a return. And that's why you had films like Superman the movie come out later, and Alien. This and Star Wars are, in my opinion, are probably responsible for the resurgence of the sci-fi movies in the late 70s and beyond. And it helped audiences and critics take sci-fi seriously again. I mean, to put things into perspective on how well this was received, legendary science fiction author Ray Bradbury, he said this is the greatest science fiction film that he had ever seen. I mean, that's really high praise. I mean, that's Ray Bradbury we're talking about. I mean, this is a legendary science fiction writer. So, also, it was also one of the first films in many years to have aliens that, you know, like I said earlier, weren't sucking your brains out, weren't trying to invade, they weren't trying to kill us. So that also makes me kind of question why why Kathleen Kennedy was all, oh, there aren't any friendly alien movies. What about this? What about Close Encounters? These aliens are fairly friendly. I mean, they're kind of dicks earlier, you know, kidnapping the kid, but, you know, that honestly doesn't bother me that much. Because, honestly, I think the kid was drawn to the aliens anyway, and he wanted to go. The kid went through the doggy door, so the kid wanted to go anyway. So that's kind of how I look at it. When it comes to that, I think the kid was drawn to the aliens and to go on a trip with them. Because they were communicating with them or whatever, but so that doesn't ever bother me either. So, and also, yeah, this is the film that proved that Spielberg was not a one-trick pony. So that's it too. I mean, he probably would not have done films like E.T. or Raiders or any of this stuff if it wasn't for the success of Close Encounters, because this is the film that really showed everyone, Hollywood, you know, studios and critics, that yeah, he's not a one and done director. And yeah, so gotta give credit where credit is due for the film for that. But anyway, yeah, I've talked your ear off about this movie, and I hope you guys found it entertaining regardless. I hope I didn't bore you to tears. I just had a lot to say about this movie, a lot to praise, a lot of stuff that I wanted to say in regards to how much I love this movie and why. And I hope you guys liked the video, and yeah, thanks for watching. And as always, I will see you guys later. See ya.